you
Ready?
want Wanda to go, is that all right? Okay.
Good morning, Denver. In the last 20 years, Denver has become a vibrant city. We are a mecca for growth, innovation, and political independence. You don't have to look far to see what Denverites are proud of. We're proud of our booming economy. We are leaders in new energy. We are world-class research hospitals. We have top-rated universities and colleges. And then, of course, my favorite, we lead the world in cannabis sales and production. It is time for Denver to have leadership that matches our forward thinking. We want leadership that we can be proud of, not one riddled in scandal. We want leadership that embraces our new economies, while at the same time focuses on inclusion and respect for all people. We want leadership that can balance our growth while encouraging affordability for the people that call Denver home for generations. We want dramatic leadership. I am proud today to introduce a woman. I am proud today to introduce a leader. I am proud today to introduce a daughter of Denver. I am proud today to introduce Denver's next mayor. I am proud today to introduce Dr. Lisa Calderon.
I want to thank Wanda James, who has been an early encourager of not only me, but women, strong, powerful, vocal women running for office. And so I want to thank her for her support in that introduction. Let's thank Wanda together. I also want to thank, first and foremost, my family who has stood by me through all of my years of serving the community and activism, and they're pretty used to it by now, but still, this is a new level of engagement. I have my mother, Elaine Calderon, my daughter, Savannah Smith, and I have several of my aunties and cousins. Do you want to wave your hands? All right, and then I also want to thank my fabulous campaign team, Mandy Nunez, Hennessy, my wonderful campaign manager who brought all of this together very quickly. So Mandy and the rest of the campaign team, if you want to raise your hands, we so much thank you for putting things together. They were up till last night putting the finishing touches on our website. Lisa for Denver Mayor, the number 4, .org. We're also on Facebook, and is our website live yet, Mandy? It is. Our website is live, so if you want to get involved with our history-making campaign, please go there, sign up. And share the joy with us, and of course we're happy to take your donations too. So I also want to thank, of course, all of you, the wonderful friends and supporters. I've just been overwhelmed by the wonderful well wishes from people, and I've heard people calling me for months to get in, and I wanted to make sure it was the right decision for me and my family. It's a huge step, and I'm glad that I'm taking it. So I'm going to share some thoughts with you all today, and then open it up to the press for any questions they may have. The Martin Luther King statue has long been a rallying point for social justice marches and protests in Denver. But often overlooked are the other 2 icons whose shoulders Dr. King stands on, Sojourner Truth and Rosa Parks. These 2 women were unexpected leaders who made great sacrifices to move this country forward out of the darkness of segregation and into the light of freedom. Today, it is in this spirit of these great women that I stand before you as a native-born daughter of this city, a mother, a worker, a community leader, an educator, to formally declare my candidacy to become the first woman mayor of the great city of Denver. As a longtime community activist, I challenged politicians, but never considered myself one. Running for public office is actually the last thing I wanted to do. However, I spent my entire adult life in the service of others. It is precisely because I am not a politician, but rather a public servant, that I have decided to run for public office. You might have heard of our slogan by now, it's time. The time has come to elect a mayor who will set a new direction for Denver by creating a more affordable, accountable, and humane city where every voice matters. We will do this under the 3 pillars of equity, fairness, and justice. When we're talking about equity, we're talking about the voices that have been left behind in the city, specifically women, workers, and residents. I've met so many women who have come up to me and said, you know, I feel like because I work for the city, if I were to be sexually harassed and it's by an elected official, I'm not protected. And so one of the things we're going to be focusing on is strengthening protections and opportunities and parity for women workers. When we talk about fairness, we're talking about implementing checks and balances, accountability. It doesn't make sense to have one set of rules for the mayor and another set of rules for the 11,000 city workers. When we look at the issues of accountability, we're going to look at strengthening the ethics board to give them real power to censure public officials when they've crossed the line. And when we look at residents, equity for residents, we want to even the playing field for developers so that it's resident-led development rather than the other way around. We want to decentralize City Hall so we're not having a top-down decision-making process. Residents understand best what they need in their communities, and we need to be starting there with the process of planning the future of our city. It's time that we make affordable housing our #1 priority. And I'm speaking to the woman who sleeps in her car at night, changes in a public restroom, and then goes to work so no one knows she's homeless. I'm talking to the young man who, when he's let out of jail in the middle of the night and walks all night in the cold because he has no place else to go, when he came to my reentry program for help. We have to do better, Denver. Yes. Our hearts are bigger than that, and we need leaders to reflect that. As a political outsider, educator, and community organizer, I am a non-traditional candidate. I wasn't groomed for political office. I don't have a war chest for my campaign, in fact, quite the opposite. I'm like many of you in terms of workers who, are just trying to stay afloat, especially after being put out of work by Michael Hancock. So for the last 9 months, it was great time to think about how I would do things differently and talking to a lot of people in this city. Our great city should not be built on the backs of others. So we have them come in and clean our offices and prepare our food, but relegate them to the outskirts of this city. They need to be sharing in the prosperity as well. And we understand what it means to struggle. My entire career has been spent in the service of others. Despite having a law degree and a doctorate in education, I have chosen to serve in nonprofits that address the root causes of social problems, such as domestic violence, mass incarceration, homelessness, substance abuse, and mental illness. And while I have loved serving my community for the past 30 years, anyone who works for a nonprofit or educational system knows These are not the career paths to getting rich, not even close. Like so many of you who are struggling to keep your heads above water, I have crushing student loan debt that makes retirement seem like an impossibility. I faced the near loss of my home in the aftermath of Denver's foreclosure crisis. I then organized with residents and advocated for laws to better protect homeowners from unscrupulous lenders. Earning a nonprofit salary, I struggled to pay my taxes when I barely made enough money to cover my family's basic needs. Yet I continually came in under budget when I managed the city's reentry program, saving tens of thousands of dollars in the nearly 8 years that I ran it. I have also experienced the despair of family members suffering with mental illness and substance abuse, who were unable to get the treatment that they needed. In other words, I'm just like you. Those who are left out of the prosperity of Denver, those who are priced out of their communities, those who are in crisis but can't get the help that they need, those who are working more than one job just to make ends meet, those who are tired of the unrelenting pace of development and traffic congestion, those who are still fighting to stop the 10-lane highway rammed through their backyards. In fact, near here, as you all know, we are close to a killing field where our historic 100-year-old trees, over 200 of them, were bulldozed down in the name of a ditch for a 100-year flood, when really it's to protect the development interest off of I-70. I stand with those of you who are homeless and constantly threatened with criminalization. I've been homeless myself, escaping an abusive situation, and understand where you don't know where your next meal is coming from. I stand with you who are heartbroken over the privatization and desecration of our public spaces, and those who feel ignored and unheard by our elected leaders. It's time. It's time. Yeah. It's time. It's time to take our city in a new direction. It's time that we have a city where all voices matter. We will do this through those 3 pillars of equity, fairness, and justice. And so today I want to mark a new beginning, a new direction in Denver, a new vision, new leadership. We will prosper together. We will manage our growth responsibly so that it works for all of us, not just some of us. We will create a more just and equitable city by creating checks on government power. We will restore the power to the people through neighborhood-driven decision-making. We will strengthen workplace protections for women and anyone targeted by abuse. By the way, we don't have to pit survivors against justice-involved people. We can do both. We can treat both humanely. We will overhaul our public safety system to create independent agencies with stronger oversight that are not subject to the whims of politicians. We will rebuild our alliances with unions to improve wages, expand apprenticeship programs, and prioritize local contractors to grow local talent from within. We will prioritize affordable housing so that working families, teachers, and laborers can afford to live in the same city in which they work. We will protect those most at risk of displacement, including homeless folks, immigrants, seniors, and those on fixed incomes. We will give young people, like my daughter and my son, Taj, a reason to believe that they can grow up and afford to live in the same city where they were raised to become the future leaders of our great city. So I say to all of you, it's time for a new wave of leadership that puts women, workers, and residents first. It's time that we have a people-first government where fairness, equity, and justice is available to all of us. We must believe it to achieve it. Now let's get this movement started. We're going to go ahead with some questions from the press. Brother Jeff?
Yes, October is National Domestic Violence Month, and of course, domestic violence has come into the political realm again via Representative Milton. There have been a couple of press conferences held in our community. Can you speak to that issue? And then also you mentioned, I think you alluded to the situation that Mayor Michael Hancock had within his administration. So can you talk to both of those issues and how you would handle them differently or how they are being handled?
Yes, Brother Jeff, thank you for the question about Representative Javon Melton. The issue came into the public consciousness around a prior conviction many years ago involving an intimate partner relationship resulting in the woman having to go to the hospital. And, first of all, that time period, I was actually running a domestic violence emergency response team, and it was probably very likely that my team responded to that call. And so I view those situations, first and foremost, to believe survivors. Without equivocation, that you can be a good person and a good man and still hurt someone. The fact that it's been years ago, I do believe in second chances. When people have atoned for their conduct, when they have talked about it openly and honestly. In our reentry program, this is what we talked about. When people were coming out of jail and we said, listen, you need to embrace the mistakes of your past. You need to take ownership without excuses. You need to use it as a strength to say, I've learned something and I'm going to share it and I'm going to never make those mistakes again. And if I do, I need you to hold me accountable. I'm still waiting for Representative Melton to make those words known to all of us publicly. I also do not think it's helpful when we have members of the Black and Latino community using violent language to oppose a woman of color speaker for coming forward and speaking around her concerns and asking men to step down who have violated women. There is no timeline on the trauma a victim faces. I am a survivor over multiple abuses, including in childhood. I live with that trauma. So if someone were to tell me that was a long time ago when you were little, I'm going to tell you it's one of the reasons I'm running, because survivors are often not believed. And we'll be having a statement and a press conference with women of color responding to that next week, Brother Jeff. Thank you for the question.
Lisa?
Yes.
I have one question for you.
Yes,
I
Jeanette?
noticed nothing the real problem in Colorado is immigration issues.
Why don't you talk into the mic so they can hear you, if you don't mind?
Okay. I have one important problem, immigration. What steps you take for protect the immigrant people, different than Michael Hancock, maybe pronounce this state sanctuary for protect the immigrant people. In this moment, this problem is real. In no listen nothing, they mention what is the next step for protect the immigrant people.
Thank you, Jeanette. So you know she's one of our wonderful activists in this city, putting herself on the line continually. Thank you for the question. First, I want to point to my mother and my family. We are a family from my grandparents. My grandmother's family was from Mexico. My grandfather's family was from Mexico. My grandmother's family crossed the Rio Grande to get here. And if they were not welcomed, I would not be here standing before you. My grandmother was also a migrant farm worker, and at the age of 4 years old, my mother had me on the picket line protesting grapes for the United Farm Workers Union. And so I have grown up in my family with a consciousness around how important immigration and immigrants are to the fabric of our American story. I have no problem with Denver being a so-called sanctuary city, but we have to go beyond platitudes and from having politicians just say that running up to an election. We need to look at immigrants not as a separate group, but as integral to our community. We shouldn't be thinking about just immigrant protections. We should be talking about when we protect women, we're also protecting immigrants. When we talk about workers' rights, we're also protecting immigrants. When we're talking about affordable housing, we're also talking about immigrants. When we focus and center immigrants in our conversation, that tells us and teaches us how to more effectively uplift us all. And I heard that as well when I was working with, for example, Native women. My daughter is an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation. And when I tried to encourage the city to have more services for Native women in jail, I was told they are too small of a population for us to focus on. And what I learned in working with victims of violence, including immigrant women, Native women, all kinds of women, is that when you serve those who are in the margins, whether because of their status, whether because of their tribal identity, we serve all of us. And so I would put immigrant issues front and center as well, because it is a reflection of not just me and how I grew up, but all of us and all of our community. Immigrants are us. What else? Yes.
David Sachs of Denver. You mentioned you're going to prioritize affordable housing. Do you have a specific plan yet to prioritize it? Is it from the budget? Is it funding? Is it incentives? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so the question was, how are we going to prioritize affordable housing? The first quick answer is go to my website. I have my plan laid out there. But when we talk about affordable housing, you know, as someone who's worked in nonprofits and served people around their housing issues, we have to have a housing first lens, which means, you know, if people do not have a safe and stable place to live, it's hard to get them sober. It's hard to provide treatment services. It's hard to change to get ready for work for the next day, and then you lose your housing. So by providing that, we need to, one, consolidate a lot of the housing initiatives in the city. They are all over the place. Every public agency has some aspect of housing that is not coordinated. The other thing we need to do is we need to demand from developers, before we provide incentives, affordable housing unit commitments. It should not be negotiated on the back end. And that's what's been happening now. We also, when we talk about resident-led development, we need to look at what does each community need in their neighborhood. I can tell you right now, I don't need a big behemoth building shadowing and towering over all of the other units. But there is a way to build for density that still takes into account community. And so we need to revisit those plans. Okay, I'll take one more question and then we'll wrap it up.
Mine is for mental health.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Vicky. I worked with her in the past. My question is how to make it stronger to protect the one with mental health incarcerated in our jails, and that suffered police brutality in there, because, you know, my situation with my brother, and you were there for me 100%, and I really thank you for that. How are we going to protect those that are mentally ill and incarcerated in our city jails and county jails and get them the right services instead of just putting them in there to get treated like crap by the sheriffs?
Thank you, Vicki. I get a lot of questions like that, actually, when people just absolutely don't know what to do. And it breaks my heart because we tend to think about people in jail as separate from us. And what we need to think about in my, 8 years working directly in Denver's jails, and over 10 years planning a reentry program and implementing it, is that we need to stop talking about us and them. We need to talk about Denver's incarcerated community. These are our brothers, our sisters, our partners. And sometimes, families, are at their wits' end and don't know what to do for them. And so we must always think about that. Whenever anybody goes into jail, they are cared about by someone. They have a family. As many of you know, it is the reason that I lost my contract, because I was standing up for issues of inmates and staff who were trying to address exactly what Vicki is talking about. We want to challenge inequitable systems, but systems are made up of people. And when people who are working are indifferent because they become bureaucrats or they become disillusioned, it's time for them to go. We need to overhaul our public safety system. It's the third prong of my pillar of my campaign. And part of that is we need to support electing an independent sheriff, someone with their own decision making. Right now, our sheriff's department is run by the mayor's office. A lot of people don't know that. And we need to have people who actually know how to run a jail, not a sheriff who was unemployed before Michael Hancock tapped him to be our sheriff, who never had been a sheriff before. We also need to listen to the people who work in the jail. I worked in the jail with a lot of people, both good and bad. And let me tell you, working with, we already know what we need to do with the bad folks. They need to move on, and we need to help them move on. But there are also a lot of good people who are also cheering me on, who want to see change. There were people who were concerned about, for example, my friend Elizabeth Epps and her rallying and getting with the ACLU to sue the city of Denver over $50 bond fees that they knew good and well in that jail needed to be paid and to let someone be released. So the short of it is we need more people who care, but we also need leaders who care, and we need leaders who will be accountable to get rid of those people who don't care.
Lisa, will you work to repeal the urban camping ban?
I will work to repeal the urban camping ban. It is an inhumane policy. So I'm also a college professor, and the urban camping ban is not evidence-based. It is not based on research. Those kinds of criminalizing the homelessness actually can have the opposite effect, because then you have more problems, more people in courts, more people in jails, more fees being paid, and so there's another way. And I also hear people who are concerned about the people living on the street or in their backyards. All of those things can be balanced when we actually use better and research-based approaches. So that's it for me. I just want to say it's time. Go to our website, go to our Facebook page, sign up, get involved, and I thank you so much for all of you coming. We are ready. Let's get it started. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Is this exciting or what? Lisa, 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 Lisa. Lisa, 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 Lisa. Hi, everyone. So now what? Okay, so we've got some people passing around sign-up sheets. Put your name, your email, your phone.
I want to endorse Lisa. I want to host a house party. I want to knock on doors. I want to make calls. I want a yard sign. And you can put a check in every single one of those. And speaking about putting a check, you can put a check in these envelopes as well. So if somebody could grab this and start passing it around.